I'm Sarah and welcome back to my channel. Today, we're doing something a little different, or at least I'm trying this out more. I've only done a few specific genre recommendations. I've done a couple for Christian fantasy. One was for magical Christian fantasy, one was for non-magical Christian fantasy. Then I did another one for clean fantasy romance books, and yeah, so I thought in honor of fall weather and stuff, I would do a different genre type, and that is urban fantasy, paranormal romance, and spiritual warfare. So, interesting combination, I'm sure, but they kind of all go together. So, I thought I would do that. I was going to do a separate video for spiritual warfare books at one point, but I haven't read enough of them, so it'd be like a 3-minute video if I did do one. So, I'm going to include it in here. So, first of all, you're probably wondering what in the world is urban fantasy. I wondered for quite a while what urban fantasy was, but in making this video, I decided to look it up and get an actual description of it. So my question with the urban fantasy and stuff has always been, what is the difference between urban fantasy and paranormal romance? Because I've heard both of them. They're used interchangeably, sometimes incorrectly, from what I can gather, because I think everybody else is just as confused as I am what that means. So I looked up actual definitions of these, and so urban fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy and places supernatural elements like magic, vampires, fae, werewolves, witches, wizards, stuff like that, in a contemporary urban setting, though it's not always in cities. Some of these places can take place in the countryside, whatever. And mostly urban because most of them end up in some kind of a city or something like that, though not always. One of the books I have on here is not in a city, is not in a big city, so it kind of fits for that. So paranormal romance is the same as urban fantasy, except with more focus on the romance. So, and not the outside causes, the outside plot. I did find an explanation that the quickest way to tell the difference between an urban fantasy and a paranormal romance is if you take out the romance plot line in a storyline, does the story completely fall apart? If it does, it's a paranormal romance because the romance is the central focus. If it does not, it's an urban fantasy. The romance is just a subplot. So yeah, that's kind of the way to tell the difference between the two, which I found very helpful because made it way easier when looking at all these books to kind of figure out where to categorize them, so to speak. Also, supernatural books and kind of, I guess, to a certain extent, paranormal, if it's just labeled as supernatural or paranormal, those are generally, apparently, when I looked up the difference between these, those are more with ghosts, minor supernatural elements, possibly they have more horror vibes to them. That is not the same thing as urban fantasy, paranormal romance, at least in the type that I'm looking at today. So none of these books have anything like ghosts or anything like that. That is more supernatural angle. We're not covering that today, and I don't really have any suggestions for that. Anyways, I'm not really that into ghost books, so yeah, that's kind of what we're covering today and of course the spiritual warfare. This is Christian spiritual warfare, the two series I have to talk about, and I'm putting them under this category mainly because I only have two. For one, like I said, it'd be a 3-minute video if I did a separate one. Also, in the secular market for urban fantasy, angels and demons are often lumped into urban fantasy because, according to a secular market, angels and demons are just magical creatures. They're not, of course. They are very real. But to a mainstream audience who is not a Christian, that's kind of how they view them. So, I figured it would fit to put them in here as well because, yes, you will often see, because if, say, these were sold in a bookstore alongside other urban fantasy books, they would be put in that category, not in its own genre. So, and often the authors will sell these books under paranormal romance or whatever because that's the categories they're offered. So, and as I'm going to try to do more with my recommendations videos and even with my reading wrap-ups, I'm going to specify if any of these books are indie print or traditionally published. I'm pretty sure the majority of these books are indie print, but I will specify if they're not. And also, I'd want to add another thing. All these books I will link down below so you can check them out. Most of them are going to be my reviews, but I do know I have at least one series on here I have not reviewed, so I'm just going to put those links to their book pages on Goodreads. So if you're interested in any of these, you can check them out. I am not going to go into huge detail about all of these because we'll be here forever. Yeah, and these, of course, are all the books I have read. And I am also including 2 series that I am in the middle of that I have not completed them all, so therefore cleanliness levels, stuff like that may be up in the air because I've only read 1 or 2 books. But I'm going to include them on here because I have a feeling they're going to stay clean, but yeah, we'll have to see. Most of these, violence-wise, I'm also going to say are not above a PG-13 level. Like, if they were made into movies, there could be some question about, you know, how much blood they might show and stuff like that. But from a writing standpoint, most of them wouldn't cross a PG-13 level. There are 2 books that are a little more bloody than the rest, but I will specify them for anybody who might be squeamish to more violence and blood and stuff like that. I'm not overly... I'm somewhat squeamish. It depends on the context of it and if it's visual. If it's visual, I'm more squeamish about violence than if it's just words. Because I can come up with my own picture. So like, say, movies, manga, stuff like that, I can't have it be too violent because that's a little too much for me. But a novel is a little different. And I also hope to do kind of like a part 2 video of like books in this genre that I want to read, that I have my eye on, that I've heard are clean, stuff like that. So I hope to make that video soon. But today, these are all about the books I have read, am currently reading. So we're just going to start off with the urban fantasy ones. So these are where the plot is the main focus. There may or may not be any romance. If there is romance, it's more of a subplot than a full-on plot of the book. The first series we're going to be talking about is the most lighthearted one on this list, I'm pretty sure, and that is the Magical Beings Rehabilitation Center by Shea. This is her very early urban fantasy series, and in this one we follow a teenager named Morgan. I forgot her name for a second. And she accidentally finds out that her substitute Spanish teacher and one of her classmates are respectively a vampire and a werewolf. And then through a series of events, they take her to like this underground place where all these supernatural beings are living. They're hiding from the regular world, and she kind of just learns that they exist, and they're trying to reintegrate themselves into normal society so they can pass as humans. So yeah, and she kind of just gets wrapped up in all this. It's a very humorous series, very funny, very lighthearted. It takes a lot of fun gags at like fantasy tropes and stuff like that. At the time, I think when the author was writing, I think it was when Twilight was in its heyday, because she makes several jokes at Twilight's expense. And yeah, it's really fun. It's really a lighthearted. I will say the first book does drag a bit. I think the first book, which is Vampires Drink Tomato Juice, is it's one of her very first books she wrote, and it kind of shows because there's like one chapter that like keeps repeating the same thing. Got a little irritating upon reread, but it's a really fun series. I still enjoy it for just its humor and the way it pokes fun at like fantasy and supernatural elements. So if you want the most lighthearted one in this series, this one is definitely it. You can get it as a box set or as separate books. The first one is Vampires Drink Tomato Juice. The second one is Goblins Wear Suits. And the third one is The Lost Files of the MBRC. So, which is more of a short story collection. The Magical Beings Rehabilitation Center, these books are all indie print. Okay, the next series I have on here is also a trilogy. That is The Dragon of 23rd Street by Kenley Davidson. This is kind of urban fantasy, kind of crossed with portal fantasy for like the first book. Because basically these magical creatures came from a different dimension, but now they're living on Earth. Integrating as humans and stuff, but they only go back to that other place, which is like completely destroyed like once in the first book. There might be a little bit of portal hopping in the third one if I'm remembering it correctly, but it's not much. It's more just around the world type thing. They don't really go back to the other place where they came from, so it kind of has a bit of that portal fantasy vibe, but it's mostly urban fantasy, so even people who don't like portal fantasy, I think, would still enjoy this book, because they don't really delve that much into it. It's just kind of an important part for the first book, and then after that, not so much for the rest of them. So yeah, in this series we follow Kira. She's living in her aunt's bookstore with her aunt, but her aunt goes away on like some kind of business trip, and she hasn't come back yet, which is kind of unusual. She only stays away a few days usually, and this is like turning almost into a week. And to top it all off, these two Fae guys come looking for her. They know her real name because Kira and her aunt are dragon shifters. However, Kira is broken. She can only partially shift, like she can grow claws in her hand, she can grow fangs and get like some scales on her, but she can't fully shift into a dragon like she's supposed to. So she and her aunt have been like in hiding from the other dragon shifters because like the other dragons will want to kill her or something like that. So these two Fae guys come looking for her, so that's weird enough. And then later on that night, this weird shadow creature attacks Kira in her own house, and then one of the Fae guys shows up to kill it before it can basically skewer her. So she ends up being like, this is weird. So she then teams up with this half Fae guy who is named Draven, and they team up together to find her aunt and figure out where the heck these shadow things are coming from, and then all kinds of other chaos happen. It's a really fun series. I really enjoyed it. I really liked also the romantic subplot in this one. It's just really good. Really fun. I actually buddy read this series with my family a while back, and we had a lot of fun, especially into the second book when there was like a big mystery involved, and we kind of went a little crazy guessing with that one, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed this series. Kira is such a little sassball. Yeah, just really enjoyed this one. This is indie print as well. And the 3 books are Dragon Chained, Dragon Hunted, and Dragon Crowned. So the next book I'm going to talk about, this is technically the beginning of a series, but it has not been continued. You can read it as a standalone. The epilogue does give away that there could be more coming, and that there's more to the story, but yeah, it has not been continued as of yet. This is also Christian urban fantasy, and that is Dark as the Night by Miriam Neal. This is a vampire book, basically. This one is one of the ones that, if technically this was like, say, adapted as a movie or something, the rating might be inching towards an R level depending on how the filmmakers showed the blood. There's quite a bit of blood. There's vampires here. There's vampires fighting werewolves. There's werewolves fighting vampires. There's a shapeshifter dude that kind of like leaves ooze behind when he impersonates people. It's kind of gross, but it's not overly detailed. So yeah, so this one might be one of the more bloodier books on this list. And in the story, we follow Skada. Believe that's how you say his name. He is looking for the vampire who turned his wife. Yeah, and he kind of has been following him all the way across the country. Then he ends up in South Carolina, in this little town called Salvation, where kind of the vampire's trail has gone cold, and he's looking for him. And then he comes across, when he needs help finding this vampire, he comes across this preacher who knows way more about this supernatural weirdness than anyone else, and he also meets this vampire named Angel. And together with them and a bunch of other people in the town, things happen from there as he's trying to find this vampire and get revenge for his wife's death, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's the basic plot of the story. I will say Angel's my favorite character. He's the vampire, our main vampire guy, and he is utterly hilarious. Everyone needs an angel in their lives. I mean, he'd probably drive me to batty if I actually had to interact with him on a daily basis, but he's great to read about. He's just a lot of fun, and he has a sarcastic streak a mile long. It's probably bigger than mine, but, would take a bit. So, yeah, this is indie print as well. Like I said, it can be read as a standalone. It is supposed to be the first book in a series, but I don't know if the author's ever going to continue the series, and it does work fine as a standalone. Also, kind of violent, so be aware of that and look into it if you're not that squeamish about some violence with, like, the vampires and stuff like that. So, really enjoyed that. Kind of has also a murder mystery vibe going on with it, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed this book. Really enjoyed all of these, but I'm just going to keep saying that because that's what we do. So, the next two I'm going to be talking about are urban fantasy series I have started, but I have not continued yet. The first one is a manga series, actually. The first 3 volumes Okay, this is confusing. It has two names. The first 3 volumes are QQ Sweeper. This is what the series started as, and these are the ones I read, because that's what my library had. So, I've read all 3 of these. So, technically, it's completed in that case, but they are the first 3 volumes of a series called Queen's Quality, which I have not continued. So, technically, even though QQ Sweeper is technically like could be considered a prequel, it's actually like the first 3 volumes of this series. So like Queen's Quality 1 should technically be like QQ Sweeper 4. It's really confusing. I don't know why they did that with the name change. Yeah, and this one takes kind of an urban, kind of a fantasy look, because this one's the most weird involved with urban fantasy because it's more on the supernatural end. But I wanted to put it here because magical things do happen in the real world. There are no like vampires and werewolves and stuff like that. It's basically we follow this group of sweepers. They're people who can go into the minds of people and basically they clean out all the bugs, which are like negative energies, negative thoughts, negative opinions about oneself, stuff like that. And they're represented as bugs in this world. So lots of images of creepy bugs because this is a manga. So if you're not into bugs, this may not be a good series for you. But, and our main character, Fumi, she doesn't remember her past. She doesn't remember a lot of things. She just knows that a lot of people consider her cursed because a lot of weird things happen around her and stuff. But she gets taken in by this family of sweepers, and she gets trained to be a sweeper to help clean out the people's minds and stuff. It's a really unique take on mental health and mental illness and stuff like that. I really loved it for that. I have not continued Queen's Quality. As I've said, I really want to, but my library does not have it, so I would have to buy it. So that's kind of why I've been kind of like, haven't quite worked my way up to wanting to buy at least a couple volumes yet. So even though I really did enjoy QQ Sweeper, I gave him like all 5 stars. So, yeah, this one is a work in progress, but I really like it, and I didn't quite know where else to put it. I think it is considered urban fantasy because of the magical element and stuff with the bugs and the sweeping and things like that, even though there's no like supernatural beings like vampires and werewolves, at least that I know of. Next one is the City Between series by W.R. Gingell. This is the other series that is a little more violent. The first book more than the second book, which is Between Shifts. The first book is Between Jobs. These are the only 2 I have read so far. Yeah, I would definitely say this one's more violent than this one. But, yeah. It's not overly detailed, but there are some things that could be very disturbing for sensitive readers. So if you're squeamish to blood, stuff like that, you might not want to try this series. In this one, we follow our main character, Pet. That's not her real name, but she's a human, teenage human, who's basically adopted by these 2 fae and this vampire who basically come in and take over her house. Because she's squatting in her parents' house because they mysteriously were murdered like several years ago. And yeah, she's of course like 17. She'd probably be put in the foster care system if they have that. This is set in Australia, so I don't know if they have a foster care system there or not. They probably do, but you know, who knows. I don't live there, so I don't know. If you do live in Australia and you want to let me know if they do that or not, feel free. But yeah, so she ends up getting adopted by them, sort of. And yeah, things go from there. There's crazy events happening. There's a lot of murders happening in the first book, which is why these guys show up, because it's like involved with like fae or something like that. And then we find out there's this world called Behind, which is like a like magical realm that is behind the human realm, and then there's like an area between that is like magical and stuff like that. The world building is a little very strange. This whole book is strange. You could call this series weird. It does take some getting used to get into it, and you kind of just have to roll with it. I mean, I've only read 2 books so far, and I still just have to roll with it. A lot of things that happen, but it's a very engaging series. The characters are really interesting. I've heard it gets better and better with each book. Like I said, I haven't continued with beyond the second one. In the second one, we get introduced to shifters, which are basically werewolves, into this one, and yeah, I have a feeling more crazy things are to come. Very excited to continue this series. I'm very interested to see where it goes. I have book 3, but I haven't been in the mood to read it as of filming this video. So yeah, very interested to continue this series. And these are also indie books. Okay, now we're going to go into what I'm calling the in-between stage. This is the only universe I have, the only like book series set that I have where the urban fantasy and the paranormal romance aspects are equally matched. You can't remove one without removing the other. So this one's kind of it kind of borders the line between urban fantasy and paranormal romance, which is very interesting. So, and that is the Magiford Supernatural City universe by Shea. There are currently 5 series set in this universe. They do go in chronological order. I'm going to be showing them in chronological order. There are at least going to be 2 more series that the author is publishing in this world that she has mentioned. However, the kind of continuation of that is on hiatus as the author is taking a break from writing to improve on her health. So what we have here is what we're currently going to get for now. So each trilogy follows a different set of characters, but they all intersect with each other into the other books as they go on, and there is an overarching plot that starts in the first series, Hall, Blood, and Mercy, that continues into the currently final series, the Gate of Myth and Power series. So, there is an overarching plot that has not been resolved yet. One of the series does not have this overarching plot mentioned in it because it's kind of a side series, but I'll talk about that when I get to that one. So yeah, this may look like a commitment because because there's 5 different trilogies, so, you know, if you're better at math, do the math, than I am, because I am no good at math, and I'm not doing that right now. But, yeah, that's a lot of books, but they are very easy to read. The characters are great. The situations are always very interesting and exciting. It's really, really good. And you can read these out of order. I would recommend reading them in publication date order, or chronological order, so... But you can skip around. You will get like some spoilers for some of the other trilogies if you do read them out of order. But if you don't mind that, go ahead and do that. First trilogy is the Hall, Blood, and Mercy trilogy, which includes Magic Forged, Magic Redeemed, and Magic Unleashed. We follow Hazel. She is a wizard, and she's like the heir to their wizard house, but things happen. Her parents end up in a car accident. She is set to take over control of the wizard house, but then a coup happens with some people in her house who are not happy with her going to be taking over because she doesn't really have much magic at all. She has like a scrap of magic, so she can't do very much. She's not very powerful, so other wizards seem to think, hey, we'll take over because you're not that powerful. So Hazel has to be on the run. She runs away, and the only supernatural person who will help her in Magiford is the most powerful head of the Drake family, which is a vampire family, Killian. But why will he help her and nobody else? It remains a mystery. So yeah, it kind of follows her adventure of trying to get back her house and her relationship with the vampires. The second trilogy is the Court of Midnight and Deception trilogy. This one we follow Layla, who is a friend of Hazel's. She is half fae, and she basically gets chosen to be the Night Court's next queen. She's not thrilled with this, however, but the Night Court's like, well, you can't really back out on it, so she has to go in and like deal with petty fae politics, deal with like her court is like bankrupt, and there's all kinds of crazy things going on. Somebody keeps trying to kill her because they're clearly not happy with half fae, half human taking over the court. And on top of all that, she also has to get married to solidify her rule. And yeah, and the only guy she's interested in happens to be a fae assassin named Rigel, who almost tried to kill her once. So, you know, there's a lot of complications going on here. So yeah, and the books in this trilogy are Crown of Shadows, Crown of Moonlight, and The Queen's Crown. The third trilogy is Pack of Dawn and Destiny. Kind of go outside Magiford in this series to a town where this werewolf pack lives, and our main character is Pip. Pip is a werewolf hunter, and she's kind of got adopted by this werewolf pack a long time ago, but she doesn't really feel like she fits in because she's a werewolf hunter living with werewolves, so she's not really, she doesn't really fit in, and she also has issues with the werewolf's alpha, Grayson, because of certain things that happened around his getting promoted and stuff like that. So she always kind of butts heads with him. But then things start happening when when regular humans start getting turned into werewolves without their permission. So yeah, there's a whole mystery behind that. They're trying to figure out who's turning these werewolves, why, and all kinds of crazy things are happening with that one. The first book is Hunted, the second book is United, and the third book is Faded. This is her most recent series, but since I'm doing them in chronological order, this series, which is Magic on Main Street, this one coincides with Pack of Dawn and Destiny in timeline-wise, so even though this is her most recent series published in this universe, it kind of goes back in time to the same time as Pack of Dawn and Destiny, which is why I'm putting it here for chronological order. You can read this after the next series as well, but it doesn't really have the overarching plot line that the rest of the series do. It's kind of its own thing set aside because we're following a different type of thing. We're following the Magical Response Task Force. Is basically like the magical police system. So they're not really involved with the big overarching plot, at least in this storyline. This is kind of like a side adventure with different characters, though we do see these characters in the other books. So I hope that wasn't confusing. So yeah, in this one we follow a vampire slayer named Jade. She has just recently been hired by the Magical Task Force, and she's trying to make friends in her task force and, you know, still keep a professional air and stuff, but she has social anxiety, so it's really hard for her. The only person she has managed to make friends with is her next door neighbor, who is a vampire named Connor. Also, at the same time, when she's out on the streets patrolling and stuff, she runs across this vampire named Ruin, who is like lurking around downtown Magiford. He's not really causing problems. He's mainly causing problems for Jade because he sees her as a vampire slayer and he sees it as fun to kind of like play with her. But then like this weird stuff starts happening. Weird magical things start happening around the magical bank. Break-ins, all kinds of things, magical artifacts keep popping up everywhere, and Jade and her task force have to learn to work together to solve whatever crime's going on, and Jade's gonna have to survive Ruin at the same time. So yeah, the first book is The Lies of Vampires and Slayers, the second book is The Games of Enemies and Allies, and the third book is The Order of Blood and Ruin. The final series, which was published before Magic on Main Street, but chronologically wise comes after it, that is the Gate of Myth and Power series. And yeah, this one is it's a loose retelling of Hades and Persephone, but extremely loose, mainly with the first book. And in this one we follow Chloe. Chloe can shapeshift into a black house cat. She has no idea what her magical race is, and she's pretty much like the lowest of the low on the pecking order, because a lot of the lower fae like to pick on her and stuff like that. She tends to get chased around by everybody as a cat and stuff like that. So she kind of just tries to keep a low profile. But lo and behold, these squabbling fae end up crossing this guy. And this guy, while Chloe's in cat form, and this guy rescues her. But she finds out he's an elf. And elves have been like eradicated a long time ago because like the supernatural war like that happened long time ago, like hundreds of years ago. The elves tried to wipe out all of humanity so that they could rule, but the rest of the supernatural beings teamed up against them and destroyed them. Well, here's this elf, and he's just basically kidnapped her. I mean, he's basically just adopted her as her cat form. So she's like, oh great, I'm stuck here because I don't know how to escape him. But Noctis, our elf character, turns out to be not as scary as she thought he was. And then there's like these weird things happening around, magical terrorist things are happening, stuff like that. Magical artifacts are being made and being sold and hurting people, and there's a lot of weird magical stuff going on. And so Noctis and his friends and then Chloe kind of end up teaming up to find out what is going on. The first book is The King's Captive, the second book is The King's Shadow, and the third book is The King's Queen. Can't tell, I really love the Magiford universe. That one, if you're going to try any of them, I would recommend those books out of all of these because they're really that good. So now we're just going to jump into the paranormal romance section. I only have two for this one. The first one is Lightning Angel by Karen I'm not sure how to say the author's last name. This is the first book in a series. I don't know how long it's going to be. This is Christian paranormal romance in the vein of Twilight, but with no vampires. In this one, we follow Alexa, and she has had to deal with a recent loss of her dad due to cancer, but she is kind of mad at God. She doesn't really want to talk to him about it, and she feels mad that he took her dad away and stuff, and through a series of really interesting and crazy things that happen, she keeps bumping into this guy named Tristan, but she never actually sees him. She just, like, talks to him and stuff like that, and then he'll just, like, disappear on her and stuff like that. And then at one point, through a series of circumstances, she tries to jump off a bridge and take her own life, and Tristan saves her. It turns out Tristan has supernatural powers. He can, like, turn invisible and do all kinds of these crazy things, and he's been, like, in the shadows protecting her from things that have been happening, people picking on her, all kinds of things, and it's their relationship. So, with this one, there is a little bit of characters do discuss the fact that Tristan does stalk Alexa for a bit. He doesn't like to call it that when he was trying to figure out why he has this weird connection towards her. But, it is kind of stalking a little bit, but characters do address it. They do talk about it. It is handled in a mature manner, and it is addressed and discussed. There's boundaries put up, and Tristan adheres to those boundaries afterwards. So, there is that. I enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. This is a recent release, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun. If you've read the book Twilight before, it has a lot of the same vibes to that book without the really cringy writing and the obsessive sparkly vampires. We don't have that part in here. And the last one I have for the paranormal romance category, that is ongoing, because I have not completed the series. I've only read the prequel and the first book. That is the Wolves of Rock Falls series by A.J. Skelly. This is clean paranormal romance with werewolves. This only has werewolves in it. I don't think there are any other supernatural beings, at least in the first book and the prequel there aren't. The prequel is Dark Shift, and the first book is First Shift. I have not continued the rest of the series yet. Only going to be talking about the first novel, which is First Shift. And this one, Megan and Sam have been friends forever. Sam has been in love with her forever, but he can't tell her his feelings because he's a werewolf. She's a human. And, you know, werewolves are not supposed to exist. He's not supposed to reveal himself or his pack. Well, he accidentally bites Megan, and she turns into a werewolf. So, surprise! So she discovers the world of werewolves, and in order to keep this kind of a secret, and because she may not stay a werewolf, she has the potential to turn back into a human, you know, a fully functioning, just no werewolf genes at all human. She and Sam have to enter this kind of like marriage of convenience thing for, you know, like legal reasons and stuff like that. And then in the middle of navigating this, someone starts trying to kill Megan. So, you know, now they gotta kill her on the loose, trying to take her down, and things go from there. I would still consider this book clean. However, it does have some very intense kissing scenes. Has a couple of mentions of fade to black scenes between a married couple. Nothing is detailed in those scenes. The kissing can get a little detailed. It's the first one I've ever used in my content rating as very detailed. So that might turn off some people. So yeah, it has some intense kissing scenes that I was a little surprised by, but nothing too extreme. So I would still consider it clean, but different people have different threshold levels. So look into that if you look into this series. Like I said, I haven't continued the rest of these books, so I don't know their content. Before we continue on to the last section, which is Christian spiritual warfare, I forgot to mention some things, because of course I did. The Magiford books, they are all indie print. So is Lightning Angel and The Wolves of Rock Falls. I'm not quite sure if they're considered indie print. It's a small press. The author runs the small press, though, so I'm not quite sure if that would be considered indie published or a small press, but whatever. They're not published under a mainstream publisher, so it's a small press book. Those books are small press books. Lightning Angel and Magiford, those are indie. So, we're going to now jump into Christian spiritual warfare, and this series was traditionally published by Thomas Nelson quite a few years ago, and it has now been republished indie by the author. So I'm going to hold up the old cover versions because I have the Thomas Nelson versions, and I will put up the new cover versions when I talk about each one. That is the Angel Eyes trilogy by Shannon Dittemore. This has a hair in it. This is the first Christian spiritual warfare I ever read, and in this one we follow Brielle. She has returned home to her little town of Stratus, Oregon. From the big city, she was making it there as a ballerina, but it just didn't work out for reasons that are very mysterious at first. We have no idea why she's back. We just know that she's grieving the loss of a friend. And we don't really know the aspect of it. It kind of gets revealed over time. And when she comes home, she meets her new next door neighbor, Jake. And they kind of hit it off not very well at first, but then they become friends. And things start happening when, due to like a storm or something, she discovers that Jake has the ability to heal people with his hands. And it's due to this halo that he got from his guardian, who happens to be, yes, his earthly guardian, but also his guardian angel. And this battle between angels and demons, light and darkness, start happening around them, and they have to navigate through it. So yeah, I super love this series. Like I said, this was like the first spiritual warfare series I ever read. I super enjoyed it. Still enjoy it to this day. I haven't reread them in a while, but yeah, I know I'm still gonna love them. The first book is Angel Eyes. The second book is Broken Wings. And the third book is Dark Halo. And yeah, I really love the new covers the authors put for this series, but I'm very partial to the old ones, of course, because this is how I read them. But yeah, I really enjoyed this series. Next to Magiford, this is the next series I would highly recommend. Last Christian spiritual warfare book series I'm going to recommend is Life After by Julie Hall. This is the omnibus version, so this has all 4 books included. There's a main trilogy, and then there's a companion novella. This one we follow Audrey. Audrey has died. Yeah, like in the first chapter, she's dead. She's in the afterlife. And she arrives in heaven, and she learns that in this kind of version of a heaven that the authors created, everybody gets a job assigned to them in the afterlife. And she gets assigned the job as a demon hunter. And she is like, no way, Jose, I am not going out there and fighting demons. I've never done anything active like that in my alive life. Why would I do that now in my afterlife? But you know, she kind of has no choice. So she's made into a demon hunter, and she's going to be training under her instructor, Logan. They butt heads like right away, so you can easily see where this is going. And then crazy things start happening with the War of the Demons. She ends up with like this super powerful sword, and yeah, Satan wants the sword, so he starts gunning for her, and it gets even crazier from there. So yeah, really enjoyed this series as well. First book is Huntress. I'll show the individual covers here. So the first book is Huntress. The second book is Warfare. The third book is Dominion. And book 2.5, which is a novella, is Logan. This is kind of Logan's backstory. He's Audrey's instructor. And yeah, it's kind of his backstory, and partially shows how his reactions to meeting Audrey for the first time. So it kind of overlaps with Huntress a bit. It's an indie print series as well. Really well done, really creative in how she decided to do like heaven and hell and stuff like that. A little bit allegorical in some parts, but I still really enjoyed this. The humor's just funny. I remember laughing a lot at this because Audrey's reactions to things is just, it's funny, but it's also like relatable, because I would just be like, yeah, I don't know if I could be a demon hunter in the next life. I don't know if I have that in me. But yeah, and just seeing her trying to navigate her afterlife and all that, and just the crazy twists involved. And yeah, it's really good. But yeah, I hope to reread this at some point someday, along with pretty much most of these other ones as well. Yeah, that is it. That is my recommendations videos for urban fantasy, paranormal romance, and Christian spiritual warfare, supernatural warfare. It's just the same thing, but you know, it's supposed to be spiritual warfare, but whatever. I can't talk on the best of days, and you know, I've been talking for almost an hour now, so I better get this video pared down and editing. It probably will be, but you never know. I've read some that are not on this list. Feel free to leave them in the comments down below for other people to find them. However, do leave them out if they contain any spice of any kind or extreme violence that would be over a PG-13 rating, because yeah, I try to keep clean books on here. The violence levels can vary between people, so that's something I'm a little less picky on. But especially if you're going to recommend like a manga or something, if it's extremely violent, please don't recommend it. If it has any spice at all, do not recommend it at all, because that is the main thing with urban fantasy, paranormal romance. They have way too much spice, which is why it's really, really hard to find clean ones. Which is why I wanted to highlight all these, because these are actually clean. So for anybody who likes that genre and they're like, I wish I could find more books about it, here are some for you. I mean, unless you've read all these, then I can't help you. But yeah. And also, of course, when I keep highlighting the independently published books, because that's kind of just my jam. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other genres that you would like me to do for recommendation videos, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. Like I said, I've already done Christian fantasy, magical and non-magical, and fantasy romance, clean fantasy romance books. So, but if you have anything else, feel free to leave them down below in the comments and I will consider them. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye!